Hello, and welcome to Trek Prime, episode 48. We're getting near 50 here, and somebody in Star Trek has turned 64 this past Tuesday, I think, and it's somebody I've wanted to discuss for a long time, and that's the actress Kate Mulgrew, I believe currently in Orange is the New Black on Netflix, and Star Trek's first... All right, let me get this exactly right, okay? Star Trek's first female captain in a weekly ongoing series. I want to get that 100% clear. 100% clear, because we've had issues with first lately. You and I have been talking about this. I'm not going to name names, but you know who we're talking about here.
People trying to rewrite history here.
Exactly. But we can. That's another whole story. But anyway, certain people trying to say first when they actually are not. But anyway, this is not a contest. This is just fact. And that's Captain Kathryn Janeway of the Federation starship Voyager. Did I get that about right? Because she used to announce the whole name like that.
Yeah.
Captain Kathryn Janeway of the Federation starship Voyager. Taking all the adjectives out, that's 6 words. My goodness, what a mouthful that was. I just realized sometimes, the ship could have shot up without if she said her name.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, okay. I'm just going to talk about, and by the way, happy belated birthday to Kate Mulgrew, kind of through the fans. Maybe they'll hear this. But anyway, I'm just going to start out by saying you can go on about this. I didn't, when Star Trek Voyager came out, I don't know if you remember this, there was a lot of secrecy about who the characters were going to be in the beginning. They weren't really talking much about it. And then this TV Guide article came out, and there was Kate Mulgrew on the cover. I really didn't know much about her. But there's a female captain. That's interesting. And they talked about a lady named Jean-Pierre Bougeot.
Yeah.
I think. Okay. Who was originally cast to play her. And of course, we all know the story that didn't come to fruition because she didn't work well with weekly television. Now, I wanted to ask you, Jeff, right off the bat. Have you seen the bonus features on the Voyager first season DVD with Jean-Pierre's unexposed footage?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's hard to base a perception of a character on a little scene, but at the end of the day, do you think that would have been a good choice if they'd gone through with it?
Well, she is a good actress. I've seen her in other movies, and Como for one of them. Was there, I think what it is, that was like her first time in television, and I don't think she was used to the schedule that one has to keep in a television, environment sort of thing where you have to work these 12-hour days every day. And she was used to doing movies. So I think, if she was able to do television, I think she would have come off as, pretty good actress. Because like I said, I've seen her in other things and she does perform well. It's just, it was a different environment for her and it just didn't work for her. And that's the reason why she just didn't want to do it anymore, because it was just too much work with that. So Kate being, mostly television in her career, she's done a lot of that. So she was used to it. So she, gets the job and the rest is history.
And if I remember, she auditioned once and they chose Jean-Pierre, and then she came back and auditioned and got the role. Infamously, Mulgrew said she screwed up the first audition pretty bad, so she was in love. But anyway, she married the guy she was in love with, and then when she came back, she was ready for the role. And, it's hard to imagine when the role was switched like that. When I saw Jean-Pierre, it's hard to imagine somebody who isn't Kate Mulgrew in that role because you've known them for 7 years.
Yeah.
But still, I had to place myself in here we go again with alternate timelines. Maybe in some alternate timeline, that was Janeway. What do they call it? Quantum reality.
Yeah.
And that wasn't even the same Janeway. That was Nicole Janeway, if I understand it, a French Canadian.
They had a different name for her then.
And then they changed it to Kathryn because of Kate Mulgrew. She thought it sounded more appropriate to her. Okay. Your first knowledge that they were going to put a female captain into the role. When did you first find out about what they were doing with Voyager and that Mulgrew was going to be in it? When did you first find out about that, and how?
when I saw a magazine on a shelf and it had her standing in the cover of it. You know,
So it was just like me, you just saw it a magazine cover?
Yeah, I was just at Borders, and they had the magazines, and I saw a picture of her on the cover, and she was the captain. I didn't even know I really didn't know much about Voyager at all until I saw the magazine, because if you remember, there wasn't much time between the time uh, uh, Deep Space Nine ended and, well, actually, no, it was right around that time where they were doing the, they were trying to do that crossover kind of early in Deep Space Nine, and that was right after Star Trek Next Generation.
Yeah, they were bringing in the Maquis.
Yeah, and they were bringing that in right off the bat. So
that was the setup for Voyager.
Yeah, so it was kind of quick, And I remember seeing pictures of the Voyager, like on, inside of magazine pictures and stuff like that. But I didn't really see any crew pictures until I saw that magazine cover with Kate Mulgrew on the front of it. So that's when I knew it was going to be, a female captain.
Yeah, it's so okay. It's just interesting how we both have the same experience.
Yeah.
With that. Now, and this is just a general thing for Voyager, and I'll put Mulgrew into credit for this. One thing about Star Trek with me, I mean, discounting TOS because that was original Trek, and they were just kind of figuring things out. One thing I look for in a show is how well the characters gel together. With TNG, it took a season or two to kind of get people to gel together.
Yeah.
Deep Space Nine, I don't know if some of them actually ever did. I mean, sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. It was kind of up and down. With Voyager, it seemed like everybody kind of gelled together very fast. It didn't seem like there was a lot of character dissension in the beginning that early on. I mean, you had, I guess if you could count it, you had, but anyway, you know who I'm talking about there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but aside from that, she wasn't a strong character. But with Janeway, the crew, even the Maquis crew, everything kind of came together pretty well in the beginning. I mean, considering there were two crews kind of pushed together by circumstance, they actually came together pretty well. But there was an observation, and maybe you've made this already about Janeway from your own personal experience that you questioned in the beginning, and I don't. Have we discussed that on here before?
I think we did, yeah.
All right. Is there any need to repeat that, or is there another point you wanted to make on that?
Well, you can just kind of remind people if they haven't seen it, because I'm sure some people will just.
Well, I forget what video it was, but Jeff and I were talking about. Yep, this is getting to that point where we're almost 50 videos in. We're discussed so much. It's hard to remember what we didn't. But he was talking about how, from his experience in the military, he felt that a lot of military commanders who were female or high up in the military that you experienced just didn't exactly have the same flavor that Janeway did. They were able to be commanding and still retain a certain level of femininity, and you felt they were trying to make Janeway a little more masculine in the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the way she approached it or if that was how they wanted her to approach it. I don't know which, but I do know that having spent time in the service, I've seen a lot of female officers, and they act their age. Okay, I'll just say it like that, because some of them are young, they're like in their 20s or their 30s, and when they're not in uniform and stuff like that, they let their hair down. They're just like anybody else that age, and so I think that people automatically, when they see somebody carrying the rank, a certain respect will emerge. I mean, they won't just look at the person wearing it; they look at that rank, and the rank deserves respect. And I think that will carry on even into the future. If there's ever a Starfleet or anything like that, I think the same thing will happen, because people understand what they have to go through to get that rank is not easy. They have to put a lot of time in. They go through a lot of studying and a lot of stress, and it's a big job. So there is that respect there.
Do you think that maybe the reason that they wrote her, because Mulgrew mentioned a couple things. She said in the beginning they were kind of being frustrated because they kept trying to change her hair and her outfits, and they weren't really sure how to approach a female character on the show. They had Jerry Taylor writing for the show at the time, but it was kind of hard because it was a mostly male staff. And, I'm wondering if that had something to do with it. Do you think that, because nowadays a lot of staffs or shows are more female oriented. Do you think?
Don't the women actresses have like female makeup people or something like
Well,
that?
makeup, yes, but I mean, in terms of writers, I don't know how many writers, aside from Jerry Taylor and a few others on Voyager, were female. Who understood how women in a hierarchy would act.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. I really don't know. I mean, I know there was some women in there that were doing stuff.
Jerry Taylor, I know, is involved in doing certain things. But I'm
Yeah.
just wondering if there was a little confusion having her be the first, weekly televised captain on I want to say that because there's been female captains before her, just episodic.
Yeah.
Example, Madge Sinclair in Star Trek 4. But other than that, we haven't seen one on a weekly basis. So this was the situation. But, writing a female captain in for one episode, like yesterday's Enterprise or the aforementioned Star Trek 4, is a little different than doing a series with a female captain each week. So I don't know. Now, in terms of how Janeway grew, do you think that trait stayed with her the whole 7 years of Voyager, or do you think she grew out of it?
You mean the initial
the kind of awkward, quasi-masculine way you were discussing?
Well, that part kind of stayed with her through the whole show, but there was a lot of times where when she wasn't on the bridge, we get to see her a little less guarded, and so they allowed that part more to develop into a regular kind of realistic woman or stuff like that. But whenever she was on the bridge, she always seemed to bring back that, what I call the artificial image thing. It's kind of like how I saw Captain Kirk in the same way, as a guy who's trying to be more masculine than he really is. He's on the bridge and he's this big mouth, and he's kind of barking at people, and he's right, everybody else has to follow him. He always seemed like overbearing in a way, and Janeway came really close to that a lot of times, being that same way.
You brought in equality, because if I were to, I don't like comparing captains because they're all very different, but if I were to bring Janeway closer to any captain, it would probably be Kirk.
Yeah, she was a little more like Kirk.
In the sense that she was just inclined to have a meeting as Picard. I'm not saying, because that's what the 24th century is, people who are more into negotiating. Yeah. But, for example, I never really heard Chakotay tell her, you can't beam down to that planet, even though we're in the Delta Quadrant, the way Riker would Picard.
Yeah.
Janeway just did whatever she wanted, basically. If she wanted to go down with the away team, she would. If she wanted to stay on the ship, she would. She kind of just did whatever she needed to do.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, in that sense, do you think that maybe that was an idea she had, that maybe she wanted to be a more take charge kind of person like Kirk?
Well, I think the creators of the show probably figured that a more Kirk-like captain would be more appealing to the fans, because, there was still that talk going around, like, who's better, Picard or Kirk?
Yeah, they were still kind of doing that when time Voyager came on. So
yeah, so that went on and on and on and on. So I figure that's what they figured. They said, well, let's make her more like Kirk in personality, And
the funny thing you mentioned about that is, do you remember there was a lot of talk around that time also of women in Star Trek being weak characters, and they wanted to make.
That was when they first had Marina Sirtis and.
Right, and even Crusher, they kind of talked about them being caregivers to male characters.
Yeah, they didn't. Even when there was action scenes, they really didn't get a chance to do a whole lot of action. It was like,
right, but they wanted women who were more tougher, and Deep Space Nine gave them that, of course.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
but they wanted to show the Starship that had a stronger female character. And one thing about Voyager was very female oriented. They had Janeway, they had B'Elanna Torres, they had Kes, and then later 7 of 9 in the beginning.
Yeah,
and And, of course, even though she was not exactly a hero character, so, they had a number of female characters, and the ship was headed by... So it had, to me, Voyager had a slightly more female vibe to it, just in general. And, I don't know if you... But one thing I liked about Janeway that I think gave her... And now, this obviously sounds terribly sexist by today's standards, because there shouldn't be an expectation for a woman to necessarily be a mother or a wife. But it was kind of nice to see Janeway show a maternalistic attitude toward Kes a little bit.
Yeah.
It kind of relaxed her character, and just, one thing I liked about Voyager is they did bring in scenes where the captain kind of interacted with the crew on certain things a little bit.
Yes, yeah.
Because we didn't have a lot of that with Picard.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, because I was thinking the same thing, too, about how... how on the Orville the captain seems to be more like an off-duty, on-duty kind of guy, and Picard always seemed to be on duty even when he was off duty, and he wouldn't really hang out in the 10 forward if he didn't have to be there. But, there has to come a point, even in the captain, where when your duty shift is over, you have to kind of unwind. You can't be all keyed up all day long.
One good example, remember when, I'm sure you know about Voyager's holodeck program of the year. Remember when the program was the Chez Sandrine?
Yep.
I think it was the first, second year they did that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, and I want to get into another Janeway holodeck thing, which I just find very interesting, but I think you know what I'm talking about. But the thing is that she came in one day, and Janeway, and acted like she didn't know the difference between pool and billiards. And she got down there and totally won the game.
Yeah, she was...
and I just found it interesting. She basically totally trolled her whole crew.
Yeah.
And so you kind of saw that she had a wiliness and kind of a slyness.
Yeah.
And that's what made the character a little more endearing, that she could have a personality outside of always being a commander.
Yeah. And I wish they probably should have done a little bit more of that. Because remember, they used to have like this season, the holodeck was going to be like this all season long.
Yeah, the holodeck program of the year.
So it was like, yeah, they should have done a little bit more like that, especially with them to kind of keep the crew coming together all the time. That's
Actually, now that I think about it, I think we should have that Janeway and the holodeck discussion, because that can get a little bit weird. We start out with that. What is even the name of it? That program with the Gothic Holland novel. Did that have a name?
Yeah, that was. I can't remember what the name of it was, but that was like in what, the first.
Yeah, it was like the first season, and then it just disappeared. First and second season.
Yeah. I mean, it was getting to the point where it was actually keeping. It was like, oh, what's going to happen next?
It was like a separate show. It was like. Yeah. There's this guy and these two kids, and you're not supposed to go up into the third floor or whatever, and then every time
it felt like there was like a sub show going on at the same time.
And then when Janeway was trying to figure it out, she'd be called to the bridge for something.
Yeah, and then they never finished it.
Right, and then they kept going back to that part of the story, and then Captain to the bridge, and it's like, what happened? What's on that third floor? And then when they do kind of get to it, it's the fact that the aliens are possessing the ship, and Janeway thinks the character is becoming part of her real life. You remember that?
Yeah.
And then we never see that program again. It's like they should have at least resolved that,
Yeah, I know.
They set up a certain scenario. I mean, if she's doing a Holland novel, they should at least resolve the Holland novel so we're not left in limbo.
Yeah, I mean, at least on Next Generation, when they tried to do a story thing like that, it was something we already knew about.
Yeah, like Sherlock Holmes or
a Shakespeare story.
Or Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And I think Dixon Hill didn't need resolution. It was kind of obviously Maltese Falcon.
Yeah.
I mean, they're looking for an object. They get an obvious Peter Lorre type in there. So, but with the Holland novel, now if you remember on PBS around that time, there were a lot of Gothic period pieces.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that was kind of an homage to that PBS trope of that time.
Yeah.
And except the fact those all had endings. This holodeck program is like, what's the thing with the third floor? What's going to happen to these kids? What happened to the mother?
Yeah.
They give you this story, and it's like, I just found that weird that they gave Janeway a holodeck program that had absolutely no real resolution. It's like she kept getting called to the bridge. Basically, it is much to say, Janeway, you have no life on this ship. You must be on the bridge at all times.
Yeah. And then when they gave her this other Da Vinci, it's like, what exactly is she doing here with this? I mean, for 1 minute she's
looking for a place to work or something on a project.
She's working on clay, or then she's talking with Da Vinci, and it's like there was no direction with that.
Yeah, that Da Vinci thing just kind of came out of the blue and didn't really have. And then in another episode, there were these aliens who came on board the ship, and she's helping build his flying machine for some reason. The Da Vinci stories just seem to have no real purpose.
Yeah.
That advanced the narrative.
Yeah.
That was just kind of her own thing. So I guess with the Da Vinci thing done, we have to go to Fairhaven, don't we?
Yeah, that was kind of...
Well, that wasn't her creation. That was Tom Paris's creation.
Yeah.
But I hate to say this. I know with Turn Chakotay, I mean, obviously there were reasons why that couldn't happen, command structure. I think she was holding out for her boyfriend for the most part that she left on Earth. But the idea that she would actually go in there and basically have a Build-A-Bear boyfriend. That's basically what it was. It was a Build-A-Bear boyfriend. She had a character that didn't suit her. Of course, I get the idea. It's like how women try to change men. I get that's the point. And she could literally go in and program him.
Yeah.
But, I just never thought of Janeway as the type who would program up her little boyfriends on the holodeck. It never seemed like her whole thing. I just found that weird they set her up like that.
Well, I mean, we saw Riker doing that in
Riker.
Yeah, the first season there, he saw him playing around on the holodeck, and he created a bar, and he wanted to get the right woman to sit in the situation.
Right. But I think he was just, having fun. But to think that Janeway is trying to basically set up a date on a more permanent basis, where Riker was just doing it for a program. Oh, I guess, but and then there's Geordi, of course, with his little holodeck fantasy with Leah Bronze. That was a whole other story. But yeah. I guess but with Janeway, I don't know. I
can't. I mean, I know it looked weird and all that, but it seems to me like which one of us wouldn't want to do something like that in that on a holodeck? I mean, to create their fantasy.
It's just, with our 20th century 21st century attitudes, there's always that thing of that real is better.
The holodeck thing really didn't show up until the beginning of the 24th century, so I guess you could say that it really didn't get addressed until that period where people are actually able to do that. I mean, we can't do it now. I mean, it's only in our imagination, but if we were able to actually do something to have a holodeck and do that in it, I think a lot of us would. I mean, it's a way of learning, that these things are artificial, and you're basically just creating a facet of yourself, and it's never going to be realistic because you take all the equation out of it of the humanity that makes things a little imperfect that you have to muddle through, because no situation is ever perfect. That's why Janeway.
I guess maybe you could look at it.
So, I mean, Janeway being, who she was, she had to learn that lesson the hard way, basically, by going through all this.
I guess, seeing the character for 6 years.
Yeah.
I just never saw her as being somebody who would see a potential lover as a science experiment like that. But, I mean, I know she's a scientist, but, again, I wish they'd drawn out more of a personal side for her interests, so you could kind of see where she was coming from.
Well, if a Borg will go in there and create a program of Chakotay,
well, that's another character.
Never going to be drawn.
Yeah, I guess you can. Well, with the Borg, you can kind of figure out. Okay, well, it's a Borg trying to figure out her humanity.
Yeah.
Janeway just met an interesting guy that she likes some things about, but I think that's the whole idea. It's like how women meet men, but they want to change certain things they don't like.
Yeah, I guess.
Except she could go in and program it rather than just change it by nagging.
Yeah.
So I guess that was what I caught from that. But I just found it weird seeing Janeway go in there and basically Build-A-Bear in this guy.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, this is all scientific and all reasonable. But in the end, she realizes there are consequences you have for that. And, consequences to the character, consequences to her.
Well, at least she didn't have to wear a backpack that weighed like a shuttlecraft just so she could pretend to be the doctor.
Not like that B'Elanna did on that holodeck with the doctor, where they had to wear that that giant shuttle. She called it like a shuttlecraft almost.
Yeah, weighed like a shuttlecraft.
Right. Sometimes Holland novel metaphors can get a little out of hand, but at least So she just changed the character's personality. But I don't know. So this is the subject I've been trying to kind of avoid because we were just talking about it. But it was kind of the onus for this video. There's been talk in the past 5 or 6 years, and in fact, it was a big internet conversation online. I just realized before Star Trek Discovery became a big internet issue. And it was an issue within Star Trek canon. And I didn't hear about it until people started posting on Facebook memes, and I started seeing YouTube videos where they started talking about Janeway being a genocidal maniac. And I said, what? You're saying, what? And I said,
obviously that conversation skewed into this tangent that really doesn't.
It just went into this weird place with it. And I'm like, what's going on here? What did I miss on Voyager? What happened? And I actually found there's an origin point to it that's at the beginning of the show.
That's what happens when you don't have people of intellect actually guiding the conversation. They just drift into these,
Well, it was a trope, and apparently it existed for a long time. And the first trope, and I wanted to mention this, but is the fact that Janeway violated regulations too often, destroying the caretaker's array. apparently, and I remember this, Tuvok said that the Prime Directive would still apply to that situation.
That is not true. And I've got evidence of that. And we can start with TOS, where in the episode Private Little War, you see Kirk interfering with violating the Prime Directive in order to save the Hill people from being slaughtered by the Valley people who were being weaponized by the Klingons. Okay, now because these two people, the two groups, we'll just say, of people on the same planet, were fighting each other. According to Starfleet regulations, Kirk was not supposed to interfere with that, even if they knew that the Klingons were, actually meddling with it. Okay, because that world was not up for wasn't up for dispute by the Federation. It was its own world, but they were there meddling with it for, they never really stated why the Klingons were there doing that in the first place, but they were there doing that. And so Kirk had he had a friend there on that world, and he cared about what happened to those people. And much like what Janeway, she cared about the Okampa. And when she, was told by the caretaker that, he did something wrong that devastated that planet, and it was a debt that never could be repaid, and he knew his life was going to end, he asked Janeway if she could finish his job for him, because he wasn't going to be able to. And that meant she'd have to sacrifice getting home in order to save those people for him. Now, that's not violating the Prime Directive. That's an actual, an alien who's actually sending out, SOS, I need help, and the Federation does respond to distress. So this alien, which was not an inferior life form, this was actually a superior life form, okay, and it was actually trying to help these people because they were being invaded constantly by the Kazon, okay? The Kazon are out there with these ships, and they're constantly intruding and trying to slaughter these people. The Federation is naturally going to get involved in that because they're there to protect life, from these things. There's no Prime Directive does not apply in this situation, okay? It was everything was set up for that. Now, Tuvok, the way he was laying it out in black and white, okay, you can argue the black and white version of following the Prime Directive, but not every law is set in stone. And if you make laws set in stone, they become unjust. And that's been shown all time and time again through Star Trek up to that point, is that oftentimes the Prime Directive has to be looked at and gauged before you can rule yes or no on a situation like that. Every situation is different.
That's a good point you made, because that could explain a lot of the problems with Janeway, that she violated regulations. So is that saying that because she's a female captain, she must be perfect and never violate the rules?
No captain ever. I mean,
that gives her special autonomy, because like you said, no captain ever did that.
No, that's right. Even Picard violated the Prime
Picard
Directive.
even was proud of it. He said there can be no justice as long as laws are absolute.
He said that. Look, remember when they tried to corner him, in a hearing, and he said there's been an explanation for every violation that I made, and Starfleet already reviewed it and they okayed it. So I mean, there was no point. They can't just say black and white. Okay, let's take General Order 7 from TOS. Even that law was never followed to the bone. That was the only general order where you get the death penalty for violating. That's right. And when Spock violated that order, did they put him to death? No.
Oh, by the way, about regulations, you mentioned General Order 7.
Yeah.
In the Turnabout Intruder, Sulu and Chekhov said the death penalty was forbidden at that point, except for General Order 4.
Yeah. Well, I'm bringing up that episode because that illustrates what I mean about you have to look at the situation. You can't just, if you just say, oh, you crossed the line, you're dead. If Starfleet doesn't do that, they don't say you're dead because you crossed the line. They want to say, why did you cross the line? What was going on that you had to violate that order? And obviously they looked at Spock.
Right. And, the way Federation law is, when you look at it, it's not set up to invite draconian things.
That's right.
And like I said, saying that Janeway, violated regulations too free and easy is either saying that Starfleet would advocate for one draconian law, or say that because women are a certain type of human being, they should follow regulation to the T and should not deviate.
Yeah.
So either way, and it's okay. So you're right. The whole thing is a Tuvok's black and white thing was kind of with Janeway doing what Kirk and Picard did before her.
That's right.
Making a command decision. based on the fact that you cannot, like you said, if you follow laws, absolutely, it becomes draconian.
That's right.
So, we sure live around a lot of that now, don't we? And it's not fun.
Humans can't shut their feelings off. I mean, that's what the whole thing about Star Trek is about the human condition, exploring feelings. And that was the first episode that we see with a female captain, and we didn't know her. So how are we going to know her is by exploring how she feels, how she thinks. That was the perfect setup to find out what kind of captain she was going to be in that series. Was that this is a person that's not going to blindly follow orders, because they're there. She's gonna view it at all the angles and figure out what's the best thing.
And even though she does that, in the end, she decides there should be a Starfleet crew.
That's right.
That I still want to go by Starfleet regulations. I still respect them, but that doesn't mean they can be absolute either.
That's right.
There should be discussion. There's a time for debate, and there's a time to make a decision. She was pretty good with that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give her a pass on that one. I'm not saying that, if you look in terms of being laws are absolute, frankly, you shut them all in the brig for that.
Yeah.
You shut them all in the brig, in the end of the day.
Yeah, none of the captains would have made it.
Kirk would have been hauled off to Starfleet, barricades.
And look at Benjamin Sisko with what is it?
Oh, boy.
They
were draconian about that. He would have been thrown into the gulag.
Yeah, why weren't they talking about that? Why did they pick poor Janeway? There was a lot they could about Sisko,
I think it's a double standard because I think that with women, they're expected to be lawful and obedient. Yeah. And Janeway just did her job the way she was supposed to be doing, which meant that sometimes, as a human being, she had to bend rules of specific circumstances.
That's why when you was telling me before about how that conversation ended up the way it did, that she's a genocidal maniac. Well, who's going to talk about this but people that are going to be looking at it from one side, okay?
Right. I don't know if it's so much against Janeway as a captain or more of against female captains.
And that's what I think was going on is these Star Trek fans were probably a little bit sexist. So the conversation is going to drift off the rail into this friggin' avenue where they ended up where they did. It's like
nobody really ever called Janeway a Mary Sue or anything. They knew she was imperfect, but they kind of made it out like, well, she shouldn't be violating rules the way she does.
Yeah.
Maybe with a who does she think she is kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Now, another one that was brought up, and this has nothing to do with regulations. This has to do with a personal decision Janeway made. Now, I know how I feel about it. And it's an episode I've actually been toying about discussing in a whole, but I think we're going to flip-flop on that and just discuss it a little bit here because it's a good time to do it. An episode of Voyager called Tuvix. Tuvok and Neelix get merged together by a transporter accident. And it takes them a while to figure out a way to separate them, but in that meantime, Tuvix becomes his own character. So when they find the means to separate them, he considers himself an individual and doesn't want to be separated. Yeah. And a lot of people think Janeway committed absolute 100% murder in that. I do not. And here's the reason.
Yeah.
Tuvix was the creation of an accident. Okay? Tuvok and Neelix were two individual people. And now Tuvok wasn't there, obviously, to give her any Vulcan logic of his, but she took the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few attitude with that. That, this was an accident of nature. This was not something that Tuvix was not originally there. So it's like, do I keep one life form alive and essentially murder two others?
Yeah.
And I think she made the only decision she really could.
Well, you could look at it that way, or you could say, well, Tuvix really didn't die. He still lives in the embodiment of Tuvok.
Right, even though I guess they didn't remember him.
Yeah. It's just that, even Janeway liked Tuvix. You could see in that whole episode, she kind of...
And Tuvix's pleas to live were hard for her to hear.
Yeah, and it wasn't easy for her to make that decision. But at the same time, she liked Tuvok because they went back even further. They were really close friends, and
she needed his services, and she liked him too. So
she had to think of Kes and how Kes was.
Yeah, Kes was really caught in the middle of all that.
Yeah, so there was a lot to consider there. It wasn't just Janeway's feelings; it was a lot of different things going on here. And with the way they had to split the Tuvix apart, he didn't really die. It just reset back the way things were, before that happen. And it was sad to see a character go and become two again, but it wasn't really putting them to death.
Right, because what happened is that, but again, it's that weird window characters achieve their own sentience kind of. But Janeway, I don't think it was murder at all. I think it was the only decision she could really make.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you have to make those hard choices. You know.
I mean, if we were going to follow that line, then what happened with Kirk when he split into two? They shouldn't have reintegrated him, right?
Right, because the other Kirk wanted to live, but the other Kirk would have basically murdered and raped everybody in sight.
Yeah.
And the other Kirk would have lost the ability to command, so it was win-win to put them together.
Yeah. So again, another situation where it's in reverse, but
or
are you going to kill the evil Kirk just
right? Or in terms of Voyager, in an earlier Voyager episode, the Vidian separated the Klingon and human belong to Taurus.
That's right.
Suppose the Klingon version said, "I don't want to go back to my human half."
Yeah.
But they started out as two halves
Right.
as a Klingon human hybrid, and that would be unfair to B'Elanna to have her separated into two beings.
Yeah.
But that was not even a discussion. Now, on a more level of a captain being a murderer, could we say that Picard was responsible for the death of the crew of the Enterprise C by deliberately sending them back to get murdered?
Yeah.
I mean, you can have that argument all day, but see, they knew they were supposed to actually die in that battle.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't... Now, even though there's time alterations in there and all that stuff, you could see that he realized that the Federation was going to lose that war with the Klingons if they didn't send him back.
Yeah.
They didn't send the Enterprise C back, when the war wouldn't have happened at all.
That's right.
So, I mean, like I said, did we call Picard a murderer for doing that?
It's another thing where, where you try to find out the humanity or how far a human being will go to try to do what he thinks is right or what she thinks is right. And sometimes people on the outside who aren't in the position of making those choices can sit here and judge the others for doing so. You really can't really say, that was murder or not,
It just surprises me at how people want to single out Janeway as being a villain. And it's
there was only maybe a couple times where you could see Janeway being a villain. That was that episode, The Equinox.
Yeah, where she kind of lost her perspective, and
she was almost going to kill somebody just to interrogate him.
I mean, haven't we done that with Cisco?
Yeah.
Didn't Cisco border on that line sometimes?
Yeah, like when he was chasing down Eddington there. In the
he kind of did what Janeway did in Equinox.
Yeah. He launches, and the funny thing is nobody ever said anything about that, but he actually launched, a plague into a planet to force everybody off it. So he basically wiped out a world.
So does that make him any less of a genocidal maniac than Janeway?
Exactly. So it's funny how they overlooked what the things Cisco did in the show he was on. But, but poor Janeway, oh, no. Every little move she makes, we're going to gauge it,
Well, I mean, I'm not saying what Cisco did was right, but I'm not saying that what Janeway did was necessarily wrong. I mean,
You got to be fair about it. You have to be fair about it. They just.
I mean, like I said, Janeway and Cisco can both lose perspective, but they both did moments where they did good things. So,
yeah.
I mean, I guess sometimes people want to single out a person and make them into whatever it is they have in their minds. But I never saw Janeway as a villainous character. I mean, number one, she's 75 light years away, where a lot of laws are kind of sketchy. And, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, oh yes, I forgot another one. And this one is a little bit awkward, even for me at certain times, but I found a way to measure it. Her alliance with the Borg.
Yeah, that's another one.
That could be seen as a severe tactical mistake.
It could, because of the risk involved, and Chakotay was right in his argument against what she was doing, though. I mean, making an alliance with the Borg would be so unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to do, and you're dealing with such a vast, what do you call that? A hive mentality. I mean, they'd be overwhelmed in an instant, if they decided to change their mind.
Which they did. And, even 7 of 9 told them in their first meeting that a confrontation with the Borg would also be dangerous.
That's right.
So, I mean, the Borg were kind of telling her, yeah, don't mess with us unless you mean it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's like people who work in aviaries. I mean, you can see the Borg like a swarm of bees. They're just something that exists in nature, and that's just what they do. But the thing with a bee is that if you were afraid of bees stinging you, would you basically try to fly with the worker bees?
this is the thing that people need to bear in mind when they watch that episode. You have the captain and you have the first officer, and in this situation, they don't see eye to eye on the solution here. Chakotay's was on the side of protecting the crew, where Janeway's perspective was trying to get the crew home. Okay, so in this situation, this is why you have a command structure where the final word is going to be on the captain. Now, the people watching it may not like that, but that's the way it is. It's her ship, it's her crew, it's her choice that's going to make or break the situation. And sometimes people can't deal with that and they mutiny. But if they have trust and faith in the captain, and by that point, I think they've been through a lot of things. What was it, like season 4, I guess, is when
Scorpion was season 3 for cliffhanger.
Yeah. So by that point, the crew had gone through a lot of things with Janeway. So there had to be some level of trust there. I mean, that she had to know something that maybe that the other crew didn't know. She was taking a gamble, and it seemed like the only one who was really making a stand against her was Chakotay. Everybody else seemed to have but they weren't going to say anything about it. They just followed her orders, but he couldn't do that, and so it was inevitable that once she, got injured and she was in sick bay and he took over, he was going to try to undo everything she was trying to do just to get the crew home or save the crew. So it's a situation where you have to let rank decide what's to be done. I mean, you can't just say, oh, she was acting recklessly, because no, she wasn't. She thought about it and agonized over it, and then she finally come to a possible avenue to take. And if she didn't take that avenue, they never would have known, because 8472 would have taken over all the territory the Borg would have had, and they would have never been able to get past that either. So it was a chance.
Right, because we had the Borg, who the Federation didn't have a defense against.
Yeah.
And they had species 8472, who the Borg didn't have a defense against.
That's right.
So there was really no winning there.
Yeah.
They were pretty much checkmated. I mean, it's basically Janeway was figuring, okay, I had to pick the worst of two problems. A Borg who we know are a problem, we know how to kind of deal with them, and this other species we don't know anything about. Now, I know, finding out who 8472 was, it might have been better to try to talk things out with them, because the Borg started that war, but she didn't know that.
Yeah, that's right.
So like I said, I think that was more of a thing made in desperation, but it's a little messier than Caretaker to me.
Yeah.
Because we know who the Borg are. We didn't know what were the Caretaker species? The Nacine, I think was the name of them. Yeah, so we didn't know anything about the Nacine.
Yeah.
But we did know something about the Borg, so we knew what they were, and we knew what they were capable of, and we'd seen them in Voyager already, and we knew that Janeway was on very slim waters.
Yeah.
Now, another issue I wanted to bring up, which I just kind of lump with the rest of them, was Year of Hell.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, that's the thing, because the problem with that story wasn't really what Janeway was doing, is that the story itself was flawed. And I can explain that better. Is that, okay, when the story starts, they come up to the Krenim border, we'll just say it was the border, and they meet a ship. Now, right off the bat, there's a problem there, because she was supposed to have already known about the Krenim before they got there, because Kess apparently had briefed Tuvok.
Yes, that's a little bit of a messy issue, because... Yeah.
But she acted like she never heard of them before. Okay, that aside, she runs across to the ship, and this guy, is telling her, you can't come in here and all that, we're going to... And she's sort of like, well, unless you got something bigger in your torpedo tube, we're just going to go right ahead and go through. And I'm thinking, okay, so we're going to violate someone's sovereignty, their area of space, because you want to get home faster.
So you feel that in that case, Janeway was kind of overreaching her authority?
Okay, I'll just say that there was probably protocol in that situation she violated. I'm sure they just don't let Starfleet captains just trample on other people's space if they're told they're not welcome there. Okay, and they were told, because remember when there was that episode where she was trying to negotiate a path to go through the space, and it was taking them forever to figure out how they can go this way and that way, through this maze they were trying to
oh yeah, the one where they had that weird path through their system because they wanted them to and she didn't say, let's get something more, I'm not gonna go in your path.
So in this case she figured, well, I got the superior ship and you guys can't do nothing, so we're just gonna fly through and you can live with it or not. And so as things got worse, she got stubborn and she wouldn't let up off of it, you know. But at the end of this episode, when we set everything back to that point, she runs across the Krim ship and they tell her you can't come in here, and she's like, okay, yeah, we'll just find another way around. And I'm like, okay.
Well, you know, you gotta wonder if maybe that Anorax had altered the timeline to an extent where it altered Janeway's personality a little bit.
Yeah, I guess. It must have, because I like,
Janeway didn't care, and then in the last one, all of a sudden she was, you know.
Yeah, more reasonable. And it's like,
said,
you know, what the hell happened here?
As they say in Doctor Who, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff. I guess.
Yeah.
Call that just a temporal. Because in the end, it almost, the way they kind of conducted it almost made it seem like she had an echo of what had actually happened in her memory.
Maybe.
Because she acted like, this doesn't seem quite right. I should go away.
She was kind of sitting there chit-chatting with Chakotay, and she didn't seem to, like, even have any memory or anything like that about it. You know, she just said, okay, yep, thank you.
And of course, we all know that last part of the episode you're just talking about was the only actually thing that actually happened.
That's right. Everything else was just, you know, another time.
I mean, unless we count the fact that Janeway is basically, in an alternated timeline, basically crashing a wrecked hulk of a ship into a Krenim time vessel.
Yeah.
which was its own story.
Maybe it was more like a Groundhog Day kind of thing where this happened over and over and over again until they finally get it right.
Who knows how many times that Anorax messed with the timeline?
Yeah, because at the end of the episode, you see Anorax already working on that stupid Krenim spaceship again. So it's like, is this going to happen all over again? I mean, is this like, a cycle?
Then he actually decides not to do it this time.
Yeah, but maybe he just set it aside. He didn't delete it. He just put it aside. So maybe at a later time he'll build it. You know, who knows? But it's just,
I just, you know.
But the story seemed a really bit, disjointed, you know. And
when they do time travel stories, disjointed is part of the job, you know.
Yeah.
It ends up being that way. So, okay, I mentioned a few Janeway moments that were interesting to me. Now, maybe I'll give you an opportunity. Can we think of any Janeway moments that were, you know, where she did a really good thing?
Well, I guess you could say the last episode where the Admiral Janeway goes back and saves.
Yeah, you know what is weird? That's often put in with the fact of Janeway, even her future self, violating regulations or violating protocol or violating.
She violated the temporal prime directive, I guess.
But in that case, if you look at the stakes that were there may have been a point to that.
Somebody was saying, well, why didn't she just go back and just stop Voyager from ever going back in there? Well, that's like, well, there's a.
We end up with saying elsewhere.
There's a reason why they didn't do that. Is because Janeway, you know, saving the Ocampa was an important thing to her. Okay, she liked Kes, and you know that those people would have been slaughtered by the Kazon if she went back.
So Admiral Janeway probably felt the same way that she did originally.
So the best time, I guess, to go back and try to stop what was going to end up happening was when they were going into that Borg area where they had those transwarp corridors everywhere. And she figured one of those corridors could have got the crew home if I'd have just, you know, listened to Harry Kim that one time and tried to make a way of going in there. So that was the point she decided to go back and save the crew, because everything up to that point she didn't want to really mess with, because they'd done a lot of good in that 7 years of the show where they'd helped some people and they did all these things. And so I guess at that point, so I mean, I don't know what else happened, to Admiral Janeway.
I think they also didn't want Voyager to be the 75-year Star Trek series.
Yeah, and plus, you know, you had another 15 years from Admiral Janeway's perspective before they got home. So I mean, I don't know what she sacrificed in that 15-year period just to get them home at that point, because that seemed to be the best point to get the crew home. There was in the last season of the show. So. That I think, you know, people they ask that question like, would they think that's a plot, you know, discontinuity or something?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think it really is. I think.
Can you imagine if they didn't end Voyager then, and we still had Voyager now in its 25th season? And still got about 37 more years to go.
She saved the universe from a Q civil war, for God's sake. You know, you can't just undo that. You know,
there's another good thing. I mean, a Q civil war would have been terrible for the whole universe.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, in the end of the day, Janeway basically did a good thing there.
Yeah, that's a big good thing, yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't discount that at all.
I mean, and then what was it? Somebody was saying, should she have been promoted to Admiral, or is that more of a punishment for her? Because
they were talking about the fact that, you know, basically Admirals are being kept from Starship.
Well, if that's the case, then why did they punish Kirk? He was only captain for about a little over 5 years, and they gave him a promotion to admiral. What did he do in that little time that was so bad that they had to punish him?
I mean, I don't want to think about Kirk because you could have the same argument with Kirk as you could about Janeway.
I know. It's always.
I mean, Kirk's always being seen as the rule breaker and the maverick, and he really wasn't. He was actually, for the most part, I see him as pretty enlightened.
Yeah.
But you know how it is. I mean, people like to kind of James Dean these characters and turn them into rebels without a cause.
Yeah, I mean, if they're gonna psychoanalyze Janeway, then let's start at the beginning here and just take a look at all the captains. And I think you're going to find there was some similarities to each one of them that did something that could be questionable or even bad.
If she had gone back to Earth after that mission to the Badlands and they found out that you got back to Earth on the backs of Lenny Ocampa, would that not have been seen as questionable?
Yeah, they would have found a way to complain about that. No, you do condemn the whole universe to destruction because you didn't stop the Q.
I mean, Starfleet would have, and the Q Civil War might have had bad side effects.
Yeah.
So I mean, in a sense, Janeway being out there had a chance to, kind of show by influence and possible morality to the Delta Quadrant.
Yeah.
I mean, now, I wanted to mention this, but it wasn't really Janeway. I think it was just the writing. They kind of turned the Borg into kind of unthreatening characters.
Yeah.
That wasn't really Janeway. I mean, that she was in the middle of that, but they kind of made the Borg less threatening.
I know. It seemed like every time they introduced the Borg into an episode, it was like they were just a little less threatening than they were before, or something.
And, that brings me to Janeway and the Borg Queen. The Borg Queen as a concept I have problems with because I never thought the Borg had a unifying personal force. It was just like a giant collective conscious.
That's right.
But then they gave it this form, and it's like, that's not what the Borg really is.
Yeah.
And Janeway's interactions with the Borg Queen were almost like she became kind of a con figure to her.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Kind of like, oh, she tasked me by destroying all these Borg. Get her. I mean,
yeah.
She kind of turned her into a Khan type figure, which is fine with Khan because he was also a human who felt jilted by Kirk and he wanted to go out and get him. But this was not the case with her. This was the Borg Queen. What threat would she have from an individual human?
That's right.
I mean, it's not like there were a mass of Janeways out to get her. You'd think the Borg would be more afraid of masses, but they were afraid of one individual.
Yeah.
I mean, how much of a threat could Janeway have legitimately been to the entire Borg collective? Maybe bit off bits and pieces here and there, but I mean, not a big threat in the long and short of things.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you can't stand toe-to-toe with them in a fight, but you have to figure out creative and ingenious ways of dealing with them,
Although Admiral Janeway had technology that blew up the first Unimatrix, which we've debated, is that the end of the Borg or not? We don't know.
Yeah.
That's a messy subject, but...
I mean, how many times you got to kill the Borg Queen before it's over? I'm
starting to run out of Janeway material to use, but just to kind of finish off some points about her character arc. Admiral Janeway, seeing her in Nemesis, did it surprise you or not so much?
No, I mean, because they already alluded that she was probably going to get a promotion, when she returned Voyager home. I mean, whether it happened later or sooner, I guess it was probably... because so many people were so happy that they came back and everything and stuff. I mean, it was like they got just swamped into the moment of things. It's like when Kirk brought his ship back after 5 years, being one of the only ships that made it back. I mean, it was sort of a big thing too for them. And, so the captain gets a big promotion and, becomes a hero. Same thing happened with Janeway. They made her into sort of an icon of Starfleet, a hero. So,
but, it's just, it's kind of funny that, I have this other idea for Voyager that would have been, because we talked about the TOS. What if Harry Kim, who didn't receive one extra pip during his whole time on Voyager, what if he came back, him, Tom Paris, and Chakotay were just all instantly made captains? And they kind of did that with TOS. They made everybody a captain after a while, so...
Yeah, I know. You got how many chiefs and not enough Indians is what they used to say.
Right. Yeah. It's like, you have too many cooks in the kitchen,
Yeah. Yeah.
But really, I mean, it's just, some people were like, oh, how could they promote Janeway to Admiral? She just got back from, But I'm like, well, I mean, when you're a commander of a ship for 7 years, I mean, what's the next thing you do?
Yeah.
I mean, After being out there for 7 years, she might have been perfectly happy in her seat.
Yeah, I think she'd been had spent enough time in space there. I mean, needed a break.
So yeah, is there any other thing you wanted to mention about Janeway here?
Let me think here. I guess it was one of the things that I liked, about Janeway was, how she kind of seemed to take, 7 of 9 under her wing to try to help her, and then she was doing that with Cass, and then
Right, that maternal thing they
so
did.
she had like 3 characters on the show that she kind of felt maternally for during the show. So it was that side of her I wish that they would have kind of explored a little bit more.
Yes, there was an episode that kind of alluded to that a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a very Janeway focused episode. I don't know if you've seen it in a while, called Coda. It's from season 3.
Oh, I think, yeah, I remember that.
It starts out where it seems like a time loop where she and Chakotay are on this planet, and then they keep going back and forth. And then she ends up going back to Voyager, and they find out she has the Vidian phage, and the doctor tries to commit euthanasia. And then she meets a man who says it's her father, who wants her to accept the fact that she's dead and take her over to the other side, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a scene at the end where Janeway's at her own funeral, basically.
Yeah.
And she's looking at everybody and talking about their character traits, and she says, I want to see how Kes is going to do. I want to see how, if Tom and B'Elanna are going to stop sparring and make something meaningful out of their friendship. So you kind of get to see that Janeway genuinely cares about her entire crew and wants to see them progress as people.
Yeah.
And I think that's a side of Janeway that I would want to see more of.
Yeah.
Her kind of having, this may sound really corny to say, but intimate moments with the crew. I mean, that sounds really strange to say that, but kind of intimate moments dealing with their situations. Kind of like how there was an episode she did with Kes that I wanted to mention too, about a swarm of aliens. And she goes through puberty. And she's scared because it's at the wrong time in her life. And Janeway is basically trying to comfort her as she would a daughter having her first period, basically.
Yeah.
So, and 7 of 9, when she's having these crises of character, Janeway, again, is like, well, I know you were a Borg, and I know the Borg do, but I want to bring you back to a state of humanity. So, again, you can say that those were really heroic actions, that she took a person who could possibly be a threat to her, 7 of 9, and said, we're not going to treat her as a threat today. We're going to try to nurture her back to what she originally was.
Yeah.
And find her uniqueness.
I liked how she interacted with the Borg children. Remember when they had the science fair thing in the Neelix's cafeteria? They remember when they had this whole thing, each one of them did something, one of them made like an ecosystem and, and all this stuff. And she was looking it over. I mean, it was kind of like, what do you call those? One of those intimate moments with the crew where you're actually interacting with kids, and it was like, it seemed like a nice moment on Voyager where you see, 7 of 9 kind of. And
I don't want to pigeonhole her as a woman though in just the role of mother either. I think another.
But even some even Cisco, I mean, with his son, you had those moments with his son,
right, because he was a single dad, and he had those familial moments with Jake. Yeah. But I think there was another moment that I thought it's just an offhanded thing. Okay, I guess this story does involve. It's the one where they have that security program of Tuvok.
Oh, the one that they stumble.
And they all kind of get involved in it, like it's a horror novel.
Yeah.
But then because of it goes out of control. So of course. So I don't want to make this blog all about or this podcast all about the person in question. I'm just
like
I said, that was the whole point. That character tended to dominate every story the character was in. So
yeah.
But the point is that in the end, they were all sitting there, Janeway and all of them, were talking about a possible new horror novel.
Yeah.
And what they wanted to do. I think Janeway wanted to do a Western.
Yeah. I mean, it was sort of like she was actually thinking that maybe the Voyager itself could be sort of a culture of where they're actually creating things of Voyager, where, like, well, we have an opportunity where the crew can actually create something of their own, and it would only be something unique to Voyager, where we'll actually make a town
exactly.
Here.
Another Janeway moment is with Naomi Wildman.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Naomi. That's.
I mean, she kind of encouraged her to pursue her studies, and gave her a token rank of captain's assistant. I know some people say, oh, she's making another Wesley, but it was just a token gesture. I just saw it as kind of her interacting with another kid, you know?
Yeah.
Like, this is the first child born on Voyager, and
Naomi was far from being another Wesley. I mean, she...
No, she was definitely a little girl. You could tell. But it's kind of like she's the first child born on the ship, and I want her to feel like, you know, this is a special thing for her. Another moment that I thought was...
I like those characters she made on the holodeck there, those weird-looking... The tree and the water.
Oh, water. The water guy that would fall apart all the time.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like the holodeck version of PBS Kids, basically. That was kind of cool.
You see like Gumby running around the corner there.
Yeah, that's like Gumby or some PBS Kids kind of show. It just
Puppets, Sesame Street. Yeah.
except there's really cool kind of sciencey vibe to it.
Yeah, it was like kind of a, you know, it was taking a fairy tale and kind of mixing a little bit of education.
But I just love to see those little elements of Star Trek in the future. And then you get to hear Janeway talk about how she flooded that entire valley when she got the program. So we know that however old Janeway is, they had holodecks when she was younger.
Yeah.
Because she obviously messed up that whole program when she was a kid. So, but another one that I just think was really funny was when she was Arachnia.
Oh yes, yeah, that was when she did those. That was pretty.
I always have a hard time keeping a straight face because she's sitting there, just in Kate Mulgrew doing her whole Z movie send up. She's sitting there saying, "Oh, I've long admired your clever fiendishness." It must have been a Who doing that because it's like I'm gonna just live out my RKO Ed Wood fantasy, and to see Janeway, who's always so serious, just playing it totally tongue-in-cheek.
That's right.
It really brought out the humor in her character.
Yeah.
I actually been in Arachne a little more. That was kind of fun just to kind of see her in Tom's little frivolous program. Just kind of letting herself loose and being funny. And so she had those moments that I think brought out the character in a great way and related you to her.
You know, another one was remember she had those 3 crewmen from below decks where she took out on a...
Good Shepherd. Yeah, that was kind of the lower decks of Voyager. Yeah. Where she basically had to mentor people who weren't exactly Voyager's best of the best.
Yeah, I like that one. That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, you know, I haven't watched that in a while. That was interesting because she had 3 people who were kind of, again, lower deck characters who needed her mentoring, and she kind of went off on a shuttlecraft alone. With a Delta Flyer in that case.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have like a lot of self-confidence.
And tried to make them feel like they were part of the crew.
Yeah.
Because you got to wonder, all these stars are these little lower deck areas, and there are crewmen down there who are kind of like...
They're kind of stuck there because they can't really get promoted anywhere else because there's all the positions are taken, and it's not like, you know, these people are going to leave ship anytime soon. So they're kind of stuck in there, and they're going to be spending a lot of time doing the same job, and, you know, I guess it would be...
I'm just wondering, I mean, this is off topic of Voyager, but do you think if TOS had survived and it was 5-year mission, there might have been a lower deck TOS story like that?
It seemed like there was a lot of people coming and going on the Enterprise during its 5-year mission. I mean,
I found that weird. It was on a 5-year mission, there were always people coming in and on and off.
Yeah, they're constantly, you know, people like maybe not even a year on the ship and they're gone. You know, it's like, you know, I mean,
but it would have been interesting to see kind of a little lower deck Star Trek story about the TOS crew.
I'm not sure how low you have to go into TOS to see if there was anybody that was actually stuck on the ship for.
I mean, I have the idea that on that ship somebody's in a crew quarters where they're like almost hitting their head against the roof or something. Some little like flat place on the bottom of the ship we don't see, because that ship seems to be kind of cramped.
Yeah.
You know, the thing with Voyager is that it's bigger than the Excelsior technically, but everything is very spacious.
Yeah, because they don't have to have as many people on it to run it, but the quarters can be bigger. And
I mean, if the ship had 700-800 people on it, they'd have all been sleeping in bunks or in closets.
Oh yeah, they'd have been stepping on each other's necks here practically. Yeah.
So, you know, I always have the impression that the TOS Connie was pretty skin tight.
Yeah, I mean, because when you look at the ship and you compare it to all the other ships we've seen in Star Trek,
smaller than Voyager.
Yeah, they're all that makes the Constitution look kind of, you know, skimpy.
And of course, some of it's technology too. But in the end, you know, I'm just going to say this right off the bat. Not only don't I get it, but I can't say I really agree with the idea that Janeway's any kind of genocidal maniac at all.
No, God Almighty.
I mean, but that trope goes on and on and on. I mean, it's not that it's ending anytime soon, but I'm going to leave that to be somebody else's own thing because it's not. You know, I mean, I've watched Voyager. I think I've watched Voyager, TOS, and TNG more than any of the other Star Treks, just to be honest. And I think when I watch Voyager, she's right up there with Picard and Kirk as far as her interactions with Starfleet regulations.
Yeah.
You know, basically adheres to the law, but it is not absolute to them.
Yeah.
So I don't see that she's genocidal.
No. I mean there was problems with stories sometimes where the stories weren't right, you know, and, you know, but I overall I don't see Janeway as being like that, because if you say she's genocidal, then it would question every decision she ever made on the show as being wrong. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't. Her character wasn't like that. I mean, she made her mistakes every now and then and stuff like that, like all the other captains did. But she wasn't like crazy or something like a mirror universe Janeway there.
Well, I mean, there were a couple of times where they actually portrayed Janeway in that way. The Fortune Doctor's Hollow novel.
Yeah.
Well, that was not really Janeway. That was Captain Jenkins. He changed it. It was clearly modeled on Janeway. Yeah. And she's sitting there. She has like these guns in her quarters, and she's like this. I mean, that one maybe.
Yeah.
Remember when she says, "Oh, your patient isn't ready?" She shoots him and says, "Well, she can be treated now." That's that.
Or that episode where Voyager had all these like 10,000 guns all over.
Oh yeah, that revisionist history where Janeway is this black collar and she's like a mass murderer.
Yeah.
And Voyager has 1,000 phaser arrays on it, and it's worship Voyager.
I can't believe Eagle Moss is making a model of that thing, and that wasn't even actually. It was just a mistake. The whole episode was like they misinterpreted the Voyager, but Eagle Moss is going to go out there and make a model of this misinterpretation.
Well, they took Voyager and just slapped a whole bunch of stuff on it.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have gotten a Voyager model and just made all that stuff to put on it if you wanted. Now, of course, with Starfleet vessel, a ship like that couldn't probably function very well.
It was top heavy as hell, because if you look at it, you know, when just freeze frame it, you see like the saucer end of it's just loaded with all the guns. I mean, it would seem like the ship would just vault upside down. You know,
they put all these guns on top of the saucer rather than in them. It's like, I mean, they wanted the ship to look fearsome.
Yeah, I guess.
Like that ship wouldn't have functioned if it had that much stuff on it.
Teeth on the front of it, that made it really look good, you know, or it's like eyeballs.
Yeah, it's like that little. Have you ever seen the Defiant?
Yeah, when they got on the cover. They got the.
Did you imagine the Defiant really looked like a shark, like a big teeth on the front? Like,
you know, the funny thing is remember you was talking about how that show was sort of like a World War II era kind of thing.
Deep Space Nine, yeah.
Yeah. They could have taken the Defiant and painted it up like one of those airplanes back in those days where they used to paint faces on the front of them.
Yeah, they used to paint teeth on the World War II planes.
Yeah, it would have literally harkened back to that World War II era where they take the Defiant, they paint a jaw face on the front of it and these vicious eyes, and it's like...
Yeah, maybe look monstrous like a stingray or something. But, you know, back to Voyager, it's just weird to see Voyager, which is basically, I would qualify it as a small cruiser.
Yeah.
And they put all this weapon stuff on it. But yeah, those are the only times where Janeway was Janus. Those aren't real Janeways. That was somebody's interpretation of Janeway.
Yeah.
And the Doctor's Captain Jenkins was just
and it's funny that in reality, that's how people are interpreting her now.
That character has the guns on the wall and everything.
Yeah. You know, the Star Trek fans are trying to interpret Janeway as being that way now.
Right, and a lot of times you see the videos about how bad Janeway is, you see pictures of those alternate Janeways. I'm like, well, that's those alternate
they're feeding off the wrong thing.
I mean, Janeway that isn't real in that episode, or that holodeck Captain Jenkins wasn't Janeway at all.
Yeah.
So it's just, I find it funny that people are basing those perceptions off. It's like saying, oh, well, Janeway's a villain because Arachnia. I'm like, Arachnia?
Right.
Really?
That was a holodeck program.
Right. I mean, you can't really base that off that. But Janeway, as she was definitely not a villainous character. And I consider her, you know, a pretty forward-thinking and innovative character who was basically a success.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. I mean, that's basically the long and short of it. So, again, happy birthday to Kate Mulgrew. And I'm glad they chose her, and I am honestly glad that they made their decision to have a female captain. I'm glad that was there. I mean, I think that was a good choice, and I can't imagine Voyager without that female presence in the command.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the ship, like I said, it was very female-oriented. I think Q even made that point. Yeah. Is this a ship with the Valkyries, or have you done away with all the men on your ship?
That's what Q called it.
And, I mean, the other Q made the men disappear, but just the fact that it was so female-oriented in the crew. I just think the vibe was there. You know, there were more women getting involved in situations in
It was a good thing you got rid of Seska though.
um,
Yeah, fast forward that one.
right. You know, I was trying not to mention it, but that particular character, as far as I was doing a podcast on it, wouldn't blame you.
Yeah,
we're not. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's a whole other thing. But with Janeway, at the end of the day, I'm just glad that Seska went off and did her own thing, and Janeway just kind of dismissed her because that was, you know, what do they say? A big toilet flushing the show down. You know, they really, that whole plot line, they needed to.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to blame Martha Hackett, but just that was flushing the show down. And I think that, you know, I'm glad that around season 4, they really started to bring out, in season 3, they started to bring out more personalized traits of Janeway rather than making her this stiff, overly, I was going to say masculine, but I wouldn't even say that, more
sort of an unattainable character, so it's like, you know, just artificial.
Yeah, kind of like just the captain.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and then also they kind of resolved that Holland novel thing was not doing anything to personalize the character. They just weren't dealing with it at all.
That's right.
Like I think you said your mother was watching that and wondering what was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, she was getting interested in that, and she wasn't really a Star Trek fan, but you know,
that Holland novel thing was kind of like, okay, what's happening in this little B story here?
Yeah.
So
you know what was happening with the kids, you know, and all that.
And then they never really resolved this. Like every time they couldn't find out what's going on. So at the end of the day, Janeway's a welcome addition to Star Trek, and to be quite honest, I never thought I'd have to say this. I think terribly, terribly underrated. I can't believe I'm saying that, but apparently underrated.
Yeah.
And underrated for reasons that people should really think about before they make a judgment call.
Now's the time to go back and look at these shows again.
Right, since they're there on streaming, you can get Voyager on Netflix and on Hulu or Amazon Prime. You know, go back, watch those Voyagers, and then ask again the question, is this person really a genocidal maniac, or is there something else playing into that?
Yeah.
Probably a good time to do that, because it's there to see it. You know, you can go back and look at any of the episodes you remember and see if it correlates with your opinions that you formed about it for different reasons.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you got any more points you wanted to make about the Janeway character, I think we're pretty much done with that. So next week, an odd-numbered episode 49. So until then, live long and prosper. And remember, there's coffee in that nebula. Had to insert that in somewhere.
Yep.
Good night, everyone.